How many times have you entered a trade, you get stuck in a area of chop or the market just doesn't move, you start to rethink the trade, switching up either from long or to short, and all of a sudden the market moves in the exact direction that you thought it would at first? I know it's happened to you because it's happened to me. When we look at a trade opportunity and we have our setup, we have our target, we need to let it work. We needed to let it go. I'm going to show you guys a quick live trade from yesterday, Friday. I entered a short, ended up getting out for break even, and then by the end of the day, the market moved to my exact target and more. I'm going to show you guys a trade and talk about what went wrong and how we can avoid having this issue as day traders. Let's get into it. What's going on, guys? Patrick here. I want to talk about this idea that when you enter a trade, the longer that it seems that like the market doesn't move to your target, or the longer that you're in the trade, you start to create reasons for why the trade isn't validated. You're looking at the price action. You're like, it's not going lower. What should I do? You end up thinking and thinking, and before you know it, you convince yourself that the market's not going to go lower. You convince yourself that you are wrong, even though you're still in the trade. You convince yourself to change maybe your stop loss. You end up moving your stop loss to break even. The market moves back up, takes you out at break even. And then all of a sudden, the market then moves lower exactly to where you thought it would go. So we got this little trade right here, currently 3 o'clock. I'll show you this setup. We got this move down. We got the signal, this idea of breaking below the 60 level. We broke below a couple pivots. We're below the VWAP. We're below the 21 EMA. So I think there's a pretty good chance this kind of moves down there to at least like 50s or lower. Back into the green. There's that move down through the 50s. Beautiful. Looking for this break below 50. Down there to the 45s. Get through this 50 area down there to the 45s next. I'm going to move my target down there to the 45s now. I think this is going to just go right through 50s here. Right through the 50s there. Beautiful. Down there to the 45s next. Get filled here at the 45s and then be done. If we break below 53s, I'll look to add one contract here. Basically just going absolutely sideways right now. That VWAP on the ES about to break through. So not liking it right here. See what happens. Get denied at the VWAP again. There we go. Through the 50. Looking for this break through the 50s. Down there to the 40s or lower. 45s, and to get the selling through the 40-50 area. I'm gonna move my stop just here to break even now. On the book map right now, got that 43 level down there. It's interesting. The ES trying to sell through here. NASDAQ get through the 50s right here. And stopping out break even right here. Yep. Basically entering for a breakdown, a very kind of typical Patrick Wieland market flow trader type of setup. This is a setup that we talk about all the time in the market flow trader community. The problem for me was we are basically in a consolidation area. We're in an area kind of at the end of day where we were just chopping. Was it a bad trade? I don't think it was a bad trade. I don't think I did really, like, you know, in hindsight, it's easy to sit here and kind of nitpick and say what I could have done differently. But let's talk about that idea, right? When you enter a trade, sat there and watched it, and then before you know it, you've now convinced yourself that you're either wrong, or you need to get out, or you need to take profit early, or you need to get out for break even. And then if you really think about, like, how many times has this happened where maybe you take profit early or you get stopped out? How many times does the trade go to your exact profit target? Is in the bigger picture, if you look at all your trades, all the data, does the data support the idea that you should move your stop to break even? Does the data represent the idea? Does the data show that taking profit early is a more profitable strategy? Or does the data show that you would have made more money if you would have held on to these winners that you're taking, right? A lot of times we end up taking a trade. It's a winning trade. We take profit early. The market moves to our target. We then get FOMO. We jump in at our exact spot where we thought we were going to take profit in the first place. And then guess what? The market then reverses and we're like, oh, why did I do that? That's the FOMO. That's the confirmation bias. Now that we've had the confirmation, our idea of that profit target got hit. And then we're sitting there like, oh man, I gotta get in. You know, like it hit my profit target. I gotta get in. Think about it as like taking a test, right? In high school, middle school, whatever it was, you took a test and multiple choice. How many times you took a test? How many times did you pick the right answer right off the bat? You look at the question, you look at the answers, you're like, okay, it's A. And then you sit there and you're like, wait, maybe it's not A. Maybe it's B. Wait, maybe it's C. And then you pick the wrong answer because you convince yourself after sitting there and talking yourself basically out of the right answer and into the wrong answer. And I think that's very similar to day trading as well. It's not going lower. It's going to bounce. Like, oh no, like what's going to happen? Oh, you know, even though maybe we're not breaking back through resistance, maybe we're not getting back above the VWAP, you know, there's all these little things that we basically create kind of like, oh, well, you know, it's holding. So I'm going to get out short. I'm going to get in long because I think it's going to go back up. And then all of a sudden you get in long and the market then ends up going lower. How do we avoid convincing ourselves that we should switch our trade or move our stop loss? There's a couple of things, right? We can look at either a support level. Is the support level holding? Is a entry a resistance level? If we're moving lower, are we pushing back up, breaking through resistance from earlier? Are we breaking through previous highs? You know, what is going on that looks bullish? Has the actual trade went from being bearish to bullish or vice versa? Has the actual setup changed? Or just because we're in the trade, we're now convincing ourselves that the trade has changed? And I think that's a good rule. Like, I'm in the trade and I need to identify reasons to why this trade isn't validated other than just like, oh, it's holding. Oh, it's bouncing. Like, just because it's bouncing does not mean it can't go lower. Just because it's bouncing around, you know, at a level does not mean that it can't go lower after, you know, the continuation of the trend. So we really need to focus on the bigger time frames, focus on key levels, and talk ourselves basically into the trade in sense of like holding on. Like, hey, look, you know, we're not making higher highs. We're not pushing back up. We're just sitting here. We're chopping. We're consolidating. We're not getting back above resistance. Like, all these things are happening. So these are all reasons that I should stay short. And that's what I should have done with that trade on Friday. Instead, I was like, oh, it's bouncing. I'm going to move my stop to break even. So instead of taking a, you know, $1,000 profit, I ended up moving my stop to break even, got out for like $15 in profit, and then watched the trade go all the way down below my target, like literally down there to the 40s, just like we talked about. So we really need to be self-conscious of what we're talking ourselves. We really need to be self-conscious. We really need to be self-aware of what we're saying to ourselves while we're in the trade. Are we trying to invalidate the trade constantly, or are we trying to validate the trade? Are we looking for reasons for the trade to be invalidated in the sense of like, hey, oh, this is happening? But are we looking at it like, oh, look, hey, look, it's still holding below my, you know, reason for me getting short. It's still holding below the VWAP. Whatever it is, there's a reason that you got short, and you should be able to look at that and be like, hey, I can hold this. I can hold this trade because it's doing exactly what I basically thought it would do in terms of stay below this level. It's not pushing back up. There's reasons to stay in the trade instead of being like, oh, I need to get out because it's holding, or this is a reason I should get out. You constantly try to create reasons to why you should take profit early. You create reasons to why you should get out of the trade instead of sitting there being like, hey, this is looking really good. All right. Even though it's not going lower, we're not pushing back up. It's still showing weakness. Let's stay in it. Let's stay in this trade. Let's stay in this winner. Let's let our winners ride. Let our winners ride, my friends. Don't convince ourselves to get out of the trade. Convince ourselves to stay. Convince ourselves to stay in the trade. Obviously, if we have a stop loss, if we have a reason to get out of the trade, like, hey, you know, it's breaking through support, whatever it is, like if there's a reason to get out, like we had a predetermined risk on the trade and we're at that point, yes, we got to get out at that point. But if we can sit there and validate the reason to stay long or stay short, let's continue that action instead of trying to invalidate our reason to get out of the trade or trying to invalidate the trade. Let's try to validate the trade over invalidating the trade, my friends. Your first gut instinct, your first idea of where you think the market's going to go is normally the right decision. And there's reasons that this happens. Emotionally, we start to convince ourselves that we're wrong because we're afraid that we're going to lose. And in the end, we end up losing anyway.